we are ready to start, right? Please, someone give me a feedback. Okay. Thank you. Okay, we are live, so ready to start. Good morning. I am Pierluigi Coppola, and on behalf of my colleague, Pillar 2, USAR Pillar 2 Transport Coordinator, Ms. Mirjana Jovanovic from Republic of Serbia, and Ms. Jasminka Kirkova from North Macedonia, I welcome you to this session at the 6th USAI Forum about green and smart transport and mobility solution connecting the Adriatic and Ionian region. Welcome. In line with the European Green Deal, the session aims at contributing to the discussion on clean and smart integrated transport solution with a focus on rail transport. 2021, as you may know, has been declared the European Year of Rail, and a number of initiatives have been planned to put the benefit of rail transport in the spotlight. In USAR, in Pillar 2, indeed, we believe that rail transport could play a significant role in the transition toward a low-carbon mobility for the economic recovery and the resilience of the Adriatic-Ionian transportation system. However, in order to take the full advantage of such benefit, we believe that the investment in the infrastructure should be accompanied also by legislative and regulatory reform. Today, in this session, we will take the occasion to present the state of the art of the rail project in the Adriatic-Ionian region, the European Commission plans in view of the TEN-T revision, and the reform required in the Western Balkan for better rail service integration with other modes, and in particular with the maritime services, the motorways of the sea in particular, in the Adriatic and the Ionian seas. So we are in depth with the authoritative speakers of this session that have kindly accepted our invitation today, and I'm sure that we will animate an interesting debate that will contribute to the ongoing debate. So I would now start giving the floor to our first speaker for its keynote address, Dr. Alain Baron from DG Move Commission. His talk will be about TEN-T revision, moving towards a stronger integration. Alain, please, the floor is yours. I think that we are going to listen about updating of the process of revision of TEN-T network, but Alain is all about infrastructure. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Pierluigi. Good morning, everyone, and great welcome from Brussels, even remotely. I'm sorry that we do not have the possibility to meet live. I hope that this will come very soon. Pierluigi, indeed, as you said, we are now starting Turning to a greener economy is also at the core of the recovery and resilience plan. And let me make a parenthesis, even directly concerns user partners. But these plans are extremely interesting because the sustainable and smart transition is at the core of the plans and the core of our discussion through two pillars. We are focusing on a more decarbonized transport, but transport. These are the two aspects in which we are currently working to provide to member states a more certainly a more solid basis to make their transport revolution in the coming years. The plans of member states to turn quickly to a full decarbonized transport economy in most of the EU member states. All member states have put a lot of emphasis on these aspects, and I would tend to say it's very good for member states, but it's also a warning signal for our partners in Western Balkans not to be lagging behind this transformation. We are living in the same continent. We are interconnected network, and I will soon come on the revision of the 10T regulation. We cannot have a different approach in the way we see transport. So I will definitely say that it's a strong challenge for EU member states, but it's also a stronger challenge for our partners in Western Balkans. And that's very important. And I hope that we'll have the opportunity to address this aspect in the coming months in a more accurate manner, but also with different partners that can support our Western Balkans friends to make this transition happening. We need financing for that, and then we will need to have around the table the EIB, the EBRD, the EU, obviously, with its funding. We will need to have also a plan for this transformation. It's not something that happens from a day to another one. I think there's a need, and I see Matej that is taking notes, and I really hope that the Transport Community Secretariat will play an important role in supporting this transition also in these countries. And then, last but not least, we should also learn from the COVID pandemic. We need to improve our trans-European transport system beyond the green and digital transition. You know very well how difficult was the spring 2020 when there were huge bottlenecks at the borders between EU member states and Western Balkan countries due to a lack of coordinations between a certain number of services in the EU member states and Western Balkan countries. So we need also to prevent that the situation happens once again. It's very important for the economy of the EU member states. It's also very important for Western Balkan partners. And together with that, it's obvious that all this transformation cannot take place without reforms, without clear policies, and also without a sound way of using the financing to support the transport sector and the development of the transport infrastructure. As I said, sooner or later, this transformation will also affect Western Balkans, and it's important in that context to see where do we stand with the revision of the 10T regulation, and I'm in particular dealing with this part which is relating to the integration, because I do not want to speak about cooperation. It's an old word now. We need to speak about integration of the network of EU member states and the network of Western Balkans. Even if the revision per se will cover other countries, and certainly the Western Balkan will be the area where we will deepen the most our approach. We are not, nevertheless, we are not working for a revolution. I know that in many countries, people are having their maps in front of them and starting to draw new connections, to modify what exists and so on. No, please. It will not be a revolution, it will be an evolution. And it will be an evolution where the quality will be at the core of the analysis versus obviously, for EU member states, Western Balkan is a very important area. For Bulgaria, Romania, Greece, Hungary, Croatia, the connection between the different EU member states goes very often through Western Balkans. So there's a real need to do something in order to align the way we are planning our infrastructure in EU member states and in Western Balkans. And it's, I would say, a lot has been done since Western Balkans have been integrated into the TEN-T regulation in 2013, but a lot remains to do. I think that's one of the aspects which is the most important, beyond the fact that obviously smart and sustainable mobility will be at the core of the revision for the EU member states, and therefore will have also to be integrated in Western Balkans, is clearly to identify common priorities for financing for 2030 and 2050. We are still having different way of financing projects, and we are still having different priorities. So in some cases, we are even lacking of connectivity between EU member states and Western Balkans. If we are speaking about rail, since we are in the middle of the year of rail, there are no connectivity by rail from Greece towards Albania. There are little connectivity from Montenegro towards Albania. There are very little connectivity between the Republic of North Macedonia towards Bulgaria. There's a lot of missing links that needs to be studied and seen how they could be integrated into the network. If we want to make rail the future, let's say, transport driver for our economies, in particular, in order to reduce the weight of road transport, reduce the weight of the emissions, this should also go through a better definition of the network and to the completion of the integration of the EU and the Western Balkan networks. And as you know, there is still a very strong imbalance between rail and road financing. If I take the latest figure that I have from the year 2004 to 2020, you see that you are investing roughly in Western Balkans 10 times more in road than in rail. So these are also aspects that will certainly require to be rethinked in parallel to the revision of the TEN-T regulation. There's also another aspect which is important that we are trying to tackle is the lack of prioritization and the frequent change of priorities. I think that's very important, and it goes hand in hand with the, let's say, strengthening the coordination between countries and in particular with member states in order to ensure when a planning is made on an infrastructure, including when in the infrastructure, in particular, sorry, when the infrastructure is supported by EU funds, that this infrastructure is, the planning is not only addressing one single country, but it's also something that will go along a corridor. And this is where I want to complete my, let's say, definition of what will be the revision. The extension of core corridors is something that we are really thinking about, and we really want to see what could be the future benefits for Western Balkans to be integrated in TEN-T core corridors. And when I'm speaking TEN-T core corridor, obviously I'm speaking about multimodal corridors, because this is another aspect of the revision of the TEN-T regulation, multimodality, and the better use of different modalities of transport to make transport more efficient, once again, more sustainable and more connected. Multimodality is really at the core of this exercise. And as you know, in Western Balkans, and I would say not only inland multimodality, but also in the multimodality between land and inland waterways or land and maritime, things are not often properly addressed. So we need to work on that, but I'm pretty sure that I'm confident that we can make a lot of progress. I just want to complete by saying that we also need to be very careful in the way the financing will be addressed to transport infrastructure. We know that all these infrastructure are extremely costly. The EU has put on the table more money in the recent past, but we know that the use of funding is extremely important in the future for these countries to target the planning has not been properly addressed, and the prioritization has not, let's say, been properly defined by some countries. A lot of relating to the development of the TEN-T and this.
Thank you very much, Alan, for this address. I've also taken note about a few points that you have outlined. And actually, we really hope that USAC could give a contribution by the end of the year in order to better identify the right investment in all the transportation system. You have spoken and you have mentioned many times the fact that the fact that financing infrastructure is important, but it should be also coupled with reforms and with prioritization of the investment. And these lead to something that we always find when we develop studies in the region that outline great disparities between between EU member states and non-member states. So this leads to the first panelist of the speaker, first panelist of today's session, Director Matej Zakonchev. Thanks for being with us, Matej. And his talk will be about the status of the rail infrastructure development in the Western Balkan. So what is the state of play, and when do you believe those disparities could be bridged up? Please, Matej.
Good morning, Pierluigi. Good morning, colleagues. Good morning, everybody who's listening to this. It's great to be here again and to talk with you and everybody else about this very important topic, and that's the rail infrastructure development in the Western Balkans, specifically in this special year of the EU Year of Rail. I also I hope you see my screen.
Yes, we can see it.
Very good. So, one second. Do you see the big screen or the small screen?
Yes, we see also the notes.
Ah, okay. So I'll try to actually. If you give me just 1 second to figure out how to make
it is
you
okay.
see the other side, not this side.
Take your time, Matej, no problem.
Now you should see the big screen.
Yeah, now it is okay. Please.
So, first of all, I would just like to say a few words about where we are in the terms of what would I like to talk today, a little bit about TCT, but more important of what we are trying to do in the Western Balkans. And here I would like to talk about the two things, which is the policy reforms that needs to happen in the rail sector, as well as the projects. And I think that it's crucial to always talk about those two areas together. So not only about what's happening on the ground, but also what's happening on the policy areas. So a little bit about the TCT, just for all of you who might not know the organization so well. Transport Community brings together 33 participants. So the entire EU 27 represented by the European Commission and the 6 regional partners here in the Western Balkans. And the aim is very simple, yet very challenging, and that is the integration of the transport market of 6 Western Balkan regional partners into the EU. And that, of course, includes the rail sector. We are achieving this goal through 2 parallel tracks. So the first track is what I said, helping the regional partners to adopt and implement all EU legislation when it comes to transport, including everything that has to do with rail transport, as well as that we are supporting the projects which are connecting the Western Balkans among themselves as well as with the EU. And now, one of our priority areas, and I would say one of the main priority areas, is rail transport in the Western Balkans. Why is this the case? One reason, and this is also already something mentioned a little bit by Alain, is the state of rail in the Western Balkans. In the last 30 years, most of the investments went to the road transport sector, and the rail transport sector actually, if you're looking at the indicators, have actually went backwards. So on some of the very critical indicators, it actually, the state of the rail in the Western Balkans, it's worse than it was maybe 20 or even 30 years ago. And of course, the second reason, and I think this is even more important reason, is because we do believe that the future actually of transport is on tracks. Not only because the rail has been underinvested, but also because it offers one of the greenest way of traveling, and also it would have the positive effects of lowering CO2 emissions, being safe, making roads safer with that, as well as all the other positive effects. And that's why we are really putting a focus on rail, not only during this EU Year of Rail, but also beyond. Now, the strategic goals and the frameworks were already described by Alain, so allow me just to mention that our 2 basic documents on which we are also planning all our rail actions are based on the 2 Commission documents. The one is the Economic and Investment Plan for the Western Balkans, which has a very clear strategic goals as well as the flagship programs, and you will see that a lot of them are actually focused on the rail investments in the region. And the second one is the Sustainable and Smart Mobility Strategy, which was adopted by the Commission in December this year. This is, of course, the basis And of course, with overall picture of the European Green Deal, as well as the Green Agenda for the Western Balkans, as well as, of course, the Paris climate objectives, which all regional participants and everybody in the EU have subscribed to. What we have done from the transport community side on that respect, we have adopted the action plan on rail, and that was done in October last year, which is basically a guidebook of what and where, who needs to do what in the Western Balkans in order for us to achieve this integration of the rail in the EU and to bring rail to the place which it deserves within the transport system of the Western Balkans. Allow me now to mention some of the policy reforms which are very much needed in the region. So the transposition and implementation of EU rail legislation is really a key factor. In the previous, let's say, 15 years, there was actually a lot of money invested in the rail in the Western Balkans, more than 2 billion euros in overall. But you have seen that this money have not had the effect which we hope it would have. And one of the main reasons for that is the lack of the reforms, as well as the coordination on the regional and pan-regional levels, so that this money could be well spent. Restructuring is the long process, but very much necessary. It's an ongoing process, and in almost all regional participants, we are having some market opening. For example, we are close to completion in Montenegro, Serbia, Kosovo, and so on. And there are other regional participants where much more effort will have to be made in that. The border crossing procedures are really a golden resource for the cutting waiting times. Just to give you an example, the average passenger rail stops for 90 minutes at the border crossings with the EU member states. And that can sometimes go 5 to 10 hours for the freight transport. So you see, even if you make completely new railway lines, if you have the border crossings where the train then spends hours and hours, you have solved only part of the issue. So it really has to be looked together. Lack of the proper maintenance plan is visible all over the region, and the new approach is more than needed for that. And here again, we have to work all together, as well as very much the focus on the safety and safe management. Here we have a very good example of the level crossing, so the crossing between the road and the rail, where a lot of accidents on the rail actually happen. And we are working now together to have a common program to actually address this. Now, actions to be done on the policy side is that the regional market opening is one of our first and primary goals. Currently, the rail market is opened in 4 regional participants, so Montenegro, Serbia, Kosovo, and Albania. And also, we have already 8 rail undertakings, which are the private undertakings in operations. And in some cases, the market share is between 10 and 40%. So the Western Balkans is, of course, a relatively small market. So the opening of the market really offers the opportunity for actually a thriving regional market. And that's the only way for the future. Here, the Serbia and Montenegro are closely entering the second transition phase within the transport community. And we hope that all our regional participants will really speed up that so that we can actually have a viable and also, a regional market which can be able to compete among itself and also in the last stage with the EU. The mutual recognition of the main rail documents, which we have a safety certificate, vehicle permits, driving licenses, is another element which we need to make a progress in order to have this possibility of having actually a viable and thriving regional market. As well as the establishing of electronic register of vehicles. On that, we are already working with our friends from the European Railway Agency to see what we can do in order for that to happen. And of course, what I said during my last slide is the border crossing agreements are absolutely necessary in order to reduce the waiting times for both passengers as well as for the freight transport. Now, to just give you a little bit of flavor where we are. This is the progress report on the implementation of the Rail Action Plan, which I mentioned in the beginning, between October, so the last year, and this year. And you will see that for all regional participants, there is a progress on that. So we are monitoring that, and we are seeing that we are actually progressing on that. And of course, we need to do more because the rail market should be 100%, but you can see from the October 2020 to May 2021, there has been a progress on that in all regional participants. Of course, the key challenges there is the political willingness and sometimes also the lack of human resources. So we need to make sure that there is a political push, but that also administrations are supported within the regional participants so that they actually can do what is asked for them to do. So good cooperation with many rail institutions, such as the Shift to Rail, ERA, and so on, it's here, of course, together with the European Commission and transport community to help all our regional participants to achieve that. Now, the progress report also showed that on a very important point of interoperability, which is an absolute necessity if we would like to have a thriving regional market, is progressing. Especially for the cross-border and safety, this is very, very important. We need to fully transpose the technical pillar delivering from the fourth railway package, and here we are also need to establish the rail infrastructure asset and management system. So this is already in preparation in Serbia, Montenegro, Albania, and Kosovo, and in North Macedonia, it was already established in the last year. Now, if we also see the third element, which is the modernization of the rail network infrastructure, again, this is where in the previous 15 years, the region invested, what I said, 2 billion euros in that. But here, however, the quality of service as well as the operational speed is around 50 kilometers per hour for the passenger rail, and sometimes going even down to the 30 kilometers per hour. So lots have to be done there in order for us to achieve only the operational speeds which the current tracks, not modernized, but the current tracks are designed for. So here, if you see some of the compliance with the 10T standards, which was discussed before, and I'm very happy that the attention is to that. If we see just on a few important indicators, let's see electrification, which is so important not only for the rail but also in a green as a green element. The rail network needs to be electrified by 2030. And of course, there are different 10T standards from electrification to the line speed, train length, ERTMS, and so on. And on electrification, we are actually 87% on the core network, 72% on comprehensive per 2021 data. And here still lots of work needs to be done, but it's going into the right direction. However, if you see the other indicator, the operating versus design speed, the conditions, the picture is very different. 30% of the core railway network is in good or the very good condition, where the speed can be achieved between 70 and 100% of the design speed. But the largest part of the core network, so 44% or 45%, is in poor condition, where the average speed is 50%. That is crucial, because that means in a practical element, for example, from Belgrade to Skopje, where it should take a little bit more than 5 hours on the design speed, the actual time to reach that is more than 10 hours. So this is what we are saying when we are talking about a need for a reform and at the same time a need for a project which are delivering on the ground, because in the end of the day, this is the difference between having a rail as a viable transport mode in the region or not. And this is the difference between traveling for 5 hours or traveling for 10 hours. And just to give you a little bit of flavor of the ongoing infrastructure projects in the region. So in the rail sector, of course, like I mentioned before, it's been a little bit in the shadow of the road network. Well, basically the road sector took 80% of the funding in the last periods. And of course, this, I believe, will change significantly in the coming years. Not only because more investment is needed in the rail sector, but also because the main financing tools and the main financing banks, such as EIB, EBRD, and the rest, will put and are putting a huge effort and focus on the projects that are contributing towards decarbonization. And here the rail is a perfect example of that. So that's why I also believe there'll be many more projects coming in the next year on rail, and of course also on a connection, and that was mentioned before, between rail and the ports on the sea as well as on the rivers. Now, we have started some regional projects initiated by the transport community, and I would just like to mention the few in order to get the feeling where we are going. So level crossing safety improvement is somewhere where we really believe that we need to have some urgent interventions in order to bring the safety of our roads as well as of the rail, and of course in that respect the rail crossings up. Another interesting project is the special car, and this is a special car that is measuring the infrastructure parameters. At the moment, there is only one such car in the region, and we would like to see how we could use that car for the entire region, because of course it has a scope which is far greater than the rail network in the region. And also there is re-establishing the train connections between capitals. I think this is really crucial. At the moment, and also due to COVID, the rail connections between the capitals in the region has significantly went down, and we need to put all our efforts to re-establish these train connections. Now, the last slide is really showing what we are doing in 2021, a few events as a European Year of Rail. So we already had the social forum, which was dedicated on the rail issues, on the kind of social aspects of the rail in the region. We have the technical committees on the railway, 3 events in 2021. We will also have the first capacity building summer school dedicated to rail for the young professionals from all across the region that will be looking at the newest technologies and the policy reforms needed in the rail in the region. And it will be crowned with the Western Balkans Rail Summit on the 13th of September here in Belgrade, where we want to bring all the policymakers, as well as we are doing it together with EIB and EBRD, to put the attention on projects on one hand, as well as on the policy reforms, which will need to go hand in hand in order for us to really put rail back on tracks in the Western Balkans. Thank you very much for your attention. And of course, any questions or any comment, I would really be happy to hear it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you to you, Matej. This was a comprehensive and very, very interesting presentation. I think that we need to even more interact with the Transport Community Treaty, we as Pillar 2 Transport Subgroup, since I think that part of the work that we have been doing with the master plan is very much in line with this, with all the studies, and are very much in line also in the goals that you are looking for in the Transport Community Treaty. So thank you very much. You have mentioned again the huge investment that railways need in reconstruction and rehabilitation, the need for reforms to strengthen the interoperability, improve the standards, electrification speeds, but you also mentioned the importance of integration of railway with other modes. And this leads us to the next talk today, and that is by Professor Kurt Bodevig, that is the European coordinator of the Motorways of the Sea. Thanks very much, Professor Bodevig, for being with us today. Please, the floor is yours. We are eager to listen about the Motorways of the Sea development in the region and plan on how this could be interact with the inland railways network. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think it's a great pleasure to be with you today, and I think it's a very interesting for what you are organizing today. So for me, I'm very happy to be here, and I have also some slides. I sent it to the organizers, so I hope they will now show us the first slide. That's fine. Can you do it in a big screen? Or I only say this, okay?
No, maybe they have to share the screen.
Yes. So I would like to start, yes, but I can't see this slide. Therefore, is there the opportunity to do it in a bigger format?
I think so. Just one moment.
Just one moment. Okay, that's fine. But I can start. The Motorways of the Sea is the maritime pillar of the Trans-European Transport Network. And it's also very important for our policy in sustainable issues. And therefore, I hope you can all see the slides now, or?
Just one moment. I'm
Just a moment, okay.
The organizer. They need to share their screen.
Yes, now we have.
Now
Thank you very much. Now it works. So let me start again. So the Motorways of the Sea is the maritime pillar of the Trans-European Transport Network policy, and it's related to its funding instrument inside the Connected Europe facility. It focuses on short-sea shipping routes, maritime links, associated maritime infrastructure, and hinterland connection, to mention a few things. The Motorways of the Sea pillar applies the European ports on the core and comprehensive network, including the core network corridors. It is very placed to support the European shipping industry and ports. It's more than transport, it's just also an issue for the whole industry. The policy priorities: the full integration of the maritime transport operations in the logistic chain. By doing so, it's also support freight flows on sea-based routes, to reduce the road congestion, as well as to increase the connectivity among the member states and the neighboring countries. Next slide, please. The Trans-European Transport Network consists a large network of namely 335 ports. Roughly 80% of all the goods are transported by sea, and it's more in the intra-EU transport scheme that we can get a sustainable effect. So short-sea shipping accounts for around 65% of all cargo transiting through EU ports, or 2.5 billion tons of cargo, and more than 400 million passengers embarking or disembarking from the European port. It shows the dimension. The next slide, please. Here you can see the pillars of the Motorways of the Sea detailed implementation plan. And there are three elements. The first pillar of the sustainable maritime space addresses to the objective and priorities in the European Green Deal, as well as the new smart and sustainable mobility strategy. That means, for instance, higher efforts in innovation and research of non-fossil fuels and new engine types in the maritime sector. The second pillar, which is in your view on the right, addresses the seamless European maritime space. The main idea is to ensure seamless transport flows on the entire TEN-T, both on the sea and on the land side. For this reason, it is important to develop proper hinterland and last mile connections. Finally, interoperability, the smart European maritime space. Digitalization is the guiding principle. How can we ensure more efficient transport flows by more digitalized systems? The ongoing COVID-19 pandemic has shown us how important it is to ensure efficient logistic chain. And this crisis definitely accelerates those digitalization efforts that will be also in the future. I underline that all three pillars are interconnected to make the maritime sector smarter, seamless, and sustainable. Coming to the next slide. The current pandemic has proven that the resilience also needs to be considered more profound than before. We now face climate change related challenges, as well as supply chain and demand related challenges because of COVID-19. I introduced the idea to having a fourth pillar covering resilience in the new work plan. COVID-19 has shown the benefits of accelerating the digitalization of maritime operations to meet urgent needs. COVID-19 has shown that the benefits of accelerating the digitalization of maritime operation is not the only part. Another aspect of resilience is the creation of a more short sea shipping links to ensure connectivity to the core network corridors as well to connect the operations. The development of port infrastructure is necessary to face the challenges related to the climate change and rising sea levels. The diversification of energy usage is not only a matter of related to climate change, but also related to our dependence on fossil fuels imported from outside of the EU. The use of alternative fuels and electrification is therefore also a matter of resilience. I'm considering adding the fourth pillar in my upcoming work plan. The next slide, please. Moving on to what needs to be done, I would like to mention the ongoing initiatives and work of the Commission. And in the main center, they're sending the European Green Deal. It is a plan to make European economy sustainable. It was presented in December 2019 and provides an action plan to boost the efficient use of resources by moving to a clean circular economy and restore biodiversity and cut pollution. The plan outlines investment needs and financing tools available. It explains how to ensure a just and inclusive transition. The EU aims to be climate neutral in 2050. It's a really huge goal, which we are facing now. Coming to the next slide. The sustainable and smart mobility strategy is added to the Green Deal, and it was in turn presented in December 2020, together with the action plan of 32 initiatives. The strategy lays the foundation for how the EU transport system can achieve its green and digital transformation and becomes more resilient for future crises. As outlines the European Green Deal, the result will be a 90% cut in emissions by 2050, delivered by a smart, competitive, safe, accessible, affordable transport system. All transport modes needed to become more sustainable. I think we have heard about rail before, but the same is also in short sea shipping. There is a huge potential to bring to the table and to realize. Milestones in this SSMS are set for 2030, 2035, and 2050. It's measurable. For instance, transport by inland waterways and short sea shipping will increase by 25% by 2030 and by 50% by 2050, compared to 2015. So it shows a huge challenge we are looking at. Next slide, please. There are several funding instruments in place to assist us into our work. I will try to provide a short overview. We are in a very difficult situation with a major task to become more sustainable and to recover from the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. Global trade has contracted more now than during the financial crisis 2008 to 2009. Global trade has contracted more now, not only as a financial crisis, is just a global, it's a global crisis which we have seen on different types of evaluations, and what we can see in the climate change is on today. Global trade has contracted more now than during the recovery is likely to be long, but the needs are immediate. The instruments in place have different application and they complement each other. The Next Generation EU is just one example, which includes the investments of the Recovery and Resilience Facility, the Horizon Europe, and the Invest EU. In this context, we must also mention the Green Deal and the Connecting Europe facilities. Next slide, please. Here we see an overview. As we can see, some of these instruments are working to address different parts of the same challenge, namely infrastructure investment and sustainability. I will not go into any details, but I give you a few examples. The Connecting Europe facility has a 60% budgetary climate earmarking. The climate earmarking in the Cohesion Fund and the European Regional Development Fund have a 30% budgetary earmarking. The Recovering and the Resilience Facility has 37% budgetary climate earmarking, and the InvestEU has also 60% budgetary climate earmarking under the Sustainable Infrastructure window. That's not all for transport, but it shows there is a potential of financial sources which we can use for our acting. From what you can see, the instruments have all contribute to the Green Deal objectives. Next slide, please. So here we have an overview about the CEF maritime funding in the East Mediterranean in the past. 45 core comprehensive maritime ports in total, of which 17 have been co-funded with 256 million grants from the CEF. Up to the present point in time, we have had 33 CEF transport actions in the East Mediterranean, of which 11 were Motorways of the Sea actions. The other were in ports. The majority of funding, 100 million euro, was granted to actions upgrade to the core maritime port of Rijeka in Croatia. As we can see, there is and has been considerable support from the European Union in this field. Next slide, please. As regard other measures to boost the sustainability of the maritime sector, I can mention the following and ongoing initiatives without going into details. First, the Fuel EU Maritime, the proposal on maritime fuels aiming at accelerating the uptake of sustainable alternative fuels in European ports. Secondly, the revised Renewable Energy Directive has entered into force in December 2018 as a part of the Clean Energy for All Europeans package. It aims at keeping the EU as a global leader in renewables and more broadly to help the EU to meet the emissions reduction commitment under the Paris Agreement. The revised directive moves the legal framework to 2030 and sets a new binding renewable energy target for the EU for 2030 of at least a share of 32%. This includes new provisions for enabling self-consumption of renewable energy and increased 14% target for the share of renewable fuels in transport by 2030 and strengthened criteria for ensuring bioenergy sustainability. Thirdly, we have the ongoing revision of the directive on the deployment of alternative fuels. This initiative sets requirements for expanding the EU's network of recharging and refueling stations for alternative vehicles. The goal is to install a sufficient number of points to all countries that they are easy to access and use. The revision will also try to bring clarity on the role of the transition fuels. In conclusion, I can mention that Maritime project will continue to be co-founded with the Connecting Europe Facility 2 regulation in 2021 to 2027 budgetary period. Next slide, please. To round up, I will spend 2 minutes on the future of the Motorways of the Sea and what I consider important given as challenges and objectives we have. The maritime transport sector forms a big part of intra-European transport system. It contributes to efforts to reduce the overall external environmental and social costs from transport. The creation of a European maritime space that I presented earlier will help to reinforce the maritime pillars. With that said, more attention is needed for short sea shipping, onshore power supply, and hinterland connectivity. Short-sea shipping can contribute to the model shift from road to more sustainable transport, and hinterland connectivity is crucial to ensure the maritime transport can compete with other modes of transport. A technology-neutral approach is necessary for alternative fuels. Air and waterborne transport have greater decarbonization challenges in the next decades due to a current lack of market-ready zero-emission technologies. Long development and life cycles of vessels is another factor, as well as significant investment needs in refueling equipment and infrastructure. These sectors are also subject to strong international competition, namely from Far East. Next slide, please. The greenhouse gas emissions from transport sector have increased. They now represent a quarter of the EU total. That is very high, but it's not high enough. The investments are therefore needed in all modes of transport. For instance, in fleet renewal, the alternative fuels infrastructure in last mile connection to the rest of the TEN-T. What is clear that grants from the EU will not be enough for a mobilization of resources from all stakeholders will be necessary. So we try to add all kinds of sources to bring such a strategy on today's table. Thank you very much for your attention. Don't hesitate. And the last slide shows also the addresses. Can you give the last slide? Yes. So I hope we stay in contact. And if you have questions or do you help by calls or something, don't hesitate to contact us. And I hope we can have a good common work. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Kurt. Thank you very much, Professor Bordewig, for this presentation. I know that you have to leave in a few minutes, so I get one question from the chat, very urgent, so that you can deal with that. And it is about how to coordinate. Actually, you outlined 2 points, that is fleet renewals and investment in the infrastructure in order to achieve a more sustainable maritime transport. I think how to coordinate the two of them, fleet renewal that it's mainly led by the market and investment in the infrastructure that it's led by the public, let's say. Yes, how to coordinate the two.
So what we can do is also, we have calls. We have a blending facility, which is a new instrument. I just was one of the creators of this instrument. So we try to stay with project in a clear context. And with INEA, our technical agency, you have also people to bring just potential together. They are looking for the technical side, and on the other field, we look where are the resources. And what we can do is, we have the sustainable issues on the one hand, but we have also to see, is it possible to realize it on the same call, in the same structure, or do we have also the opportunity to use other European sources? Perhaps is it technology in the development? We look into Horizon EU. If it's just infrastructural, perhaps a new type of engine, which you will just bring to your own fleet as ship owner, or in the port, perhaps onshore.
Thank you very much again. So actually what we have learned, thank you for this very interesting presentation. What we learned that our integration of rail at sea could be very sustainable and also but in order to achieve sustainability, we need to cut the emission of maritime transport. And this leads to the next speech of today by Professor Georgios Vokas that will present us, I guess, some case studies about how to develop clean maritime transport solution. Professor Vokas, good morning and thanks for being with us. Please, the floor is yours.
Good morning. First of all, I would like to share my presentation. I will try to do so. Okay. Maybe now. Can you see the whole presentation, please?
That's good. Thank you.
Okay. First of all, I would like to thank you for this excellent event and for the invitation for the kind invitation to participate in this wonderful forum and to be part of this panel and exchange ideas about the development of clean maritime transport solutions, as you just announced. I was more than happy to hear Mr. Kurt Bodevik, who presented most of the initial slides of my presentation, actually. He is the most adequate person to do that because of his place in the European Union. However, I would like to very quickly start and state some of the important facts from the EU Parliament and the IMO, and of course from the action plan of the EU strategy for Adriatic and Ionian region. I will try to present these slides very, very quickly. Most of these things are already presented by Mr. Bodevik. Okay, as you know, as you have seen, the initial the Green Deal provides an action plan to boost the efficient use of resources by moving to a clean circular economy. All the targets are towards to restore biodiversity and cut pollution. We all understand that we are trying to invest in alternative fuels and develop sustainable fleets. EU aims to be climate neutral in 2050, a very, very hard project and target, but really a very attractive one for the generations to come. The Just Transition Mechanism has mobilized more than 100 billion euros for the next 6 years. So the huge bet now is to convert the European climate law into a legal obligation for all countries. The European Parliament concerning the clean energy incentive has actually stated very specific points. Firstly, stated the distortion of competition between fossil fuels and the clean alternative fuels from renewable energy sources. Acknowledges the impact of the use of heavy fuel oil, so we have to reduce all the greenhouse gas emissions. The target for achieving a better climate by 2050, as said, is set. And of course, calls the Commission to address under the Fuel EU Maritime Initiative not only the intensity of the fuels, but also a lot of technical and operational measures towards this direction. Concerning ports and freight, the European Parliament also stated very important points in which I'm going to just very quickly present to you. Recalls the need for the decarbonization of ports, and a very important, target. Notes the cross-border dimension of marine ports, a lot of them in the Adriatic area, as we all know. Notes the positive role of the European Maritime Cluster to support innovation and reduce shipping emissions. Also, to support through legislation the objective of zero pollution in ports. Multimodal solutions in ports is also a target for development. The strategy for zero emission ports is also we have to work on this. calls for further investments in ports located in overseas territories to turn them into strategic clusters for multimodal transport, energy generation, storage, and distribution. What the European Parliament also concerning the emission control areas and the IMO, it is well understood that, of course, we have to minimize NOx and SOx emission levels from ships, and not only from ships, but also in the ports, which is a main target. IMO has set ambitious targets, and the European Parliament actually tries to support and push measures that are at least equally as ambitious as the IMO ones. For ships, propulsion and funding, many issues to address. Most of them are already presented. However, the steps towards the target, the already set targets are energy efficiency ships, innovation in hydrodynamics optimization, introduction, new propulsion methods, vessel optimization, digitalization and automation, as previously said. And of course, in order to achieve the new sulfur content limits for fuels set by the IMO of 0.5%, we have to make a lot of steps, but as Mr. Vodevik said, the grants from EU are not always enough. We have to make all these projects and all these steps very carefully and very well organized, and to take the good practices in order to achieve the best solution. Calls from the Commission to integrate alternative propulsion systems, to include wind and to include wind and solar into the upcoming Fuel EU Maritime Initiative, funding programs from Horizon and InvestEU for clean technologies and fuels. Additional renewable sources in the ports are always one of the first targets of the funds, and we have to include also, we are going to include green hydrogen and ammonia and wind propulsion into this agenda. Okay, new eco-design ships and renovation and modernization of existing vessels are also in the picture very strongly. The IMO goal and strategies are set, and the IMO strategy aims to reduce the CO2 emissions per transport work actually by 40% by 2030 and 70% by 2050, while by 2050 all greenhouse gas emissions from shipping will be reduced to 50%. The sulfur limit has to go down to 0.5%. The limit for emission control areas remains at 0.1%. The implementation was set from January 1st of 2020, and two main options for compliance regarding the fuels. The compliant fuels are low sulfur fuel oil and maritime gas oil, while as well as LNG, and of course approved equivalent methods like scrubbers and so on. The action plan based on the EU strategy for the Adriatic and Ionian sector, we are of course in Pillar 2, and we are focusing in maritime transport. The indicative actions for this transport are well set, and everybody is well aware of this. They all try to develop clean maritime transport solutions and to suggest such kind of ideas and projects in order to reach the desired and the set targets. Okay, here you can see some examples of the selected EIB projects in the Adrian region. In our case here in connecting the region, which is the pillar, the second pillar in which we are talking about, just for the needs of the participants. Everybody can find this information in the presentation, but we can see that connecting the region, we can see the most of the EIB projects that are running right now are focusing in this pillar. Now, only a couple of, only 2 slides for what happens in my country here. Greece has set a national energy and climate plan. This is, in Greek is called the SEC. The National Energy and Climate Plan is, of course, a plan from the Greek government in order to address and to harmonize the Greek laws for climate and energy issues, mostly focusing in promoting infrastructure for the use of natural gas and for the use of renewable energy sources, electricity, electrification, and energy efficiency improvement actions in ports. So mostly in Greece, we are focusing on natural gas and the use of renewable energy sources and electrification in ports. Okay, this is a very humble project that we are trying to start, the first pilot hybrid vessel project in Greece, a small project, but still very promising one. We are trying to connect Peloponnese and the south central Greece, also connecting a deserted island through a conventional ship that is going to be converted into a modern hybrid electric diesel one. Our university with 2 municipalities, the one of Aigio in Peloponnese and the other one in St. Nicholas from the other side, have signed such a relevant MOU, and now we have found the relevant the necessary funding in order to try to proceed to the change of to the conversion of the ship. We are going to apply an optimal charging method, of course, like wireless charging, and to make these 2 ports, which were deserted for many years, into modern, smart, and green ones. And of course, we are going to supply the electric energy of the ship from photovoltaic park in Aigio and from one wind park already installed from the other side of St. Nicholas. Okay, it's not our ship. Our ship is actually about 50 meters long and capable to carry about 30 vehicles. But still, this is the main idea of a hybrid vessel project where we have the internal combustion engine, and of course, in parallel, we are using the electric engine in order to feed the batteries while running in the open sea, and of course, using the electric machine, the motors with full batteries when charged from the ports, from renewable energy sources. Concerning the onshore power systems, okay, it is well known that the onshore power supply is known like cold ironing and alternative maritime power and so on. The shore power is especially applicable for large ships that are operating in dedicated routes and consume very large amounts of power and emit, of course, high levels of air pollutants when berthed. This is really very crucial when cruise ships are reaching and are approaching the Greek islands and all of the ports. We have to provide clean, and we have to stop their engines so ships can shut down their engines actually when berthed and plug into an onshore power source. The ship's power load is transferred to the onshore power supply without disruption to the on-load services. Of course, all the emissions to the local surroundings are eliminated, and this is the target. The target is to reduce the environmental footprint of the shipping. As you see here also, you may see that this kind of onshore power supply is supplied by renewable energy sources. It is transferred through the electric networks, network, high voltage or or medium voltage, excuse me, depends on the size of the wind or the photovoltaic power plant. Here you can see a real nowadays compact system that is used in onshore power systems, and is going to be used within the next years. There's no need to say the name of the company. We're just seeing the main parts of it, the battery pack, the transformers, and all the necessary equipment in order to produce the onshore power supply to the ships. In Greece, 2 such projects have been developed. The programs were co-funded by the European Union. The first one was an installation of infrastructure in 3 countries, Greece, Cyprus, and Slovenia, in 4 ports. And the second one was an alternative fuel implementation in port of Menica, which is on the northwest of Greece, exactly in the opposite of Italy, and the last port to the Adriatic Sea from our side. Also, charging stations for vehicles were foreseen in order to reduce the overall environmental footprint. We have to check out about hydrogen. Hydrogen, yes, it is supposed to, it has the title of the future, of the best future fuel. And it is here. It is here in testing, in research institutes, and now we are starting making some steps in order to make it real in ships. It does not emit CO2 emissions, no air pollution when used. It is essential to support the EU's commitment to reach carbon neutrality by 2050, one of the major, let's say, tools for this reason, for this target. Many reasons why hydrogen is a key priority. However, it's not. Maybe it's not. There's no need to once again present them. However, just for the to have a complete idea of the different kinds of hydrogen that can be used in how from where they are supplied. We can have electricity-based hydrogen. We can have the gray hydrogen coming from fossil-based fuels with carbon captured and released to the air, not a good option. However, it's the cheapest one up to €3 per kilogram. From the LNG, hydrogen from LNG, it is called blue hydrogen, and the CO2 emissions are stored to banks. This costs a little bit more, almost €0.5 per kilo more. And last but not least is the renewable, which is called also green hydrogen, from 2.5 up to €5 per kilogram. All these data are coming from the International Energy Association. And the future trend is not to be said. It has to be noted. Hydrogen production on board, it's something that is coming. And many companies have already set some, let's say, pilot projects on this issue. So the cost of the green, which is from renewable energy sources, hydrogen is going to be cheaper, as predicted, than the blue one by 2030 and maybe even earlier. It depends. And this happens, maybe it's very likely to happen because the cost of the renewable energy sources, as you all know, has fallen dramatically fast. And it still is.
Professor Vokas, could you please go to the conclusion? Sorry,
Yes, thank you very much. I will be very
we are running out of time.
Yes, thank you. You can very easily see in these two pictures the green hydrogen production coming from the alternative energy sources, and the blue from LNG, which is stored here in the CO2 storage tanks. Here is a comparison from the batteries and the hydrogen, which the efficiency of the batteries is still higher than the hydrogen, and a lot of work has to be done on this issue. Gamesa and Siemens are working on such kind of solutions for taking water and make desalinations, electrolyzing, producing hydrogen, and the electric energy needed is coming from wind. And then hydrogen is used in any case in any kind of transportation. Ammonia, also a very important and safe marine fuel, which is also a marine fuel of the future. Some drawbacks are definitely are on the table, but the research community is also trying to resolve toxicity issues and the cost, which is quite high at the moment. Some technical characteristics are not to be said right now, but also available in the presentation. And of course, there are some, IMO has set the pathway to ensure and to make the roadmap for ammonia and hydrogen. And a couple of last pictures, which are very important. This is the a presentation up to 2050, how the fuel mix of the maritime fuel mix will show. We're going to reduce the oil as much as we can, as you see. The natural gas is going to play a very significant role. The low carbon fuels are playing the most important role, and of course the electricity, as said before. A very strong issue that has been taken into account is the storage challenges. We have to consider that all the other solutions than the very low sulfur fuel oil are using higher storage, have higher storage demands, and this has to be addressed.
Professor Vokas, excuse me.
Yes, okay. So you can find here the fuels comparison, and for our region, a vision for connecting ports for tourism and more, which is going to combine 7 countries and the 19 ports. Could be an idea for all of us to work on this issue, and to work on this very, very hardly, and taking advantage of all the European funds to the best.
Okay, thank you very much.
It
was very comprehensive and also very detailed. The slide would be available, so I think that people that are interested can put questions to you directly via email. And I would like now to move to the last speaker, last but not least, of course, speaker of this panel, that is Professor Domenico Gattuso from Mediterranean University of Reggio Calabria. Actually, he coordinated one of the Adrian Interreg project that has recently concluded, that is Eastern, on improving interland connection with the port and of the Adriatic Ionian region. So actually, Professor Gattuso, please, the floor is yours, and apologize for this delay.
Problem. Thank you. try to be short and to go quickly to present my slides. The title is Improving Interland Connection with the Ports of the Adriatic Ionian Region, and specifically we discuss about outcomes of the Interreg Eastern project. Eastern is an acronym of Integrated and Sustainable Transport and Efficient Network. It was a project longer 3 years. We finished with the end of the project was at the end of November 2020, and the Mediterranean University, my university, was the lead partners. The project involved 10 partners by 7 countries. Here it's possible to see the sites involved because we have different actors, but the attention is specifically in the ports, and in a specific case it's a Belgrade area. The main aims of Eastern were to qualify Adrian ports as strategic nodes and hubs for the Adrian region, individuating strategies, clusters, and action plans to improve interland intermodal connection, and pushing rail freight flow at last mile connection to the TEN-T corridors. And second level, to promote innovation and knowledge transfer between ports and intermodal terminals of the AE area. The project gives a contribution to the reserve strategy, we think, because we know the objective of reserve pillar 2, and specifically we can show the topic 1 and the topic 2. In the first case, the attention was to competitive regional intermodal port system. In the second topic, the objective is a reliable transport network and intermodal connection with the interland for freight, just for freight, not passengers in our case. Here we can see the different activities in the evolution in the time, in the 3 years. We started with the local context analysis. We organized some local working groups, one for every region involved. We worked about a transnational cooperation network. We defined some best practices by analysis of literature. We defined a Eastern toolbox, and we worked to a local action plans and the Adrian action plan. So here there are some details about the activities. I just focus about 2 important activities, the capitalization activities. We participate with other partners of the Interreg projects to disseminate and to capitalize the activities and the documentation. We had 2 levels of cooperation, one at local level with the local working groups, and the second as transnational level with a transnational cooperating network. And here we can see in a short way the outputs and the results that I will discuss about. The main outputs and deliverables of the activity of the Eastern projects are 9 local analyses, one for every partner, and 1 collective identifying common issues and bottlenecks towards becoming integrated hubs. An instrument, a specific toolbox concerning methodology, guidelines, and criteria for defining the Commission to make the port and its interland an efficient and integrated hub. We realized a collection of integration best practices in Europe especially. So the very important results are 9 local action plans finalized to effective integration of ports into their interland, and one strategic action plan for an integrated port interland freight hubs network. Finally, we elaborated to a methodological approach for transferability plan in our sector. We recognize in our work that the major barriers to the development of an integrated network of ports and hubs are the lack of intermodal coordination cooperation, the lack of real-time interface of ports with the dry ports, freight villages, and intermodal logistics centers, a lack of efficient interfaces between public and administrative institutions, the road, rail, ports, and dry ports congestion. Congestion is relevant in many cases. Discussing with the stakeholders, we involved about 100 different stakeholders from different field of activities. We see that the main objective for people have to, about infrastructure, to remove existing bottlenecks and making new investments, to improve the intermodality, to pushing the rail freight flow and reducing road traffics, to share platform and technologies, to improve cooperation between different authorities and institutions. The Adrian area is indicated in this figure. We can see that it's an area very important in the Euro-Mediterranean context, crossed by 4 main corridors at the center of the Western Balkans extensions, and also Motorway of the Sea and ERMTS are developing. The position is a strategic, you know, so I don't speak about, but we have 2 figures, but we have to consider the strategic maritime Silk Road. We defined we studied some indicators in order to analyze competitiveness of Adrian ports and hubs. The first is liner shipping connectivity index. We can see that just Italy and Greece are in the first 20 positions, but the other countries are in position in rear position. The second index considered is logistic performance, and here we can see in a relative way the position of the different countries involved in the project in relation to the Germany, assumed as a reference. And in average, we have 65% related to 100 for Germany. So there are many activities to develop in order to have the good results in competitiveness. The local action plan has been elaborated using a specific methodology, a canvas model. It's a simplified way to describe actions and activities, considering specifically the involved stakeholders, the key actions, the aims, the issues and risks, the implementation timeframes, and the possible funding sources to realize the interventions. We individuate 5 fields of activities: market, operational, institutional, and innovation, and naturally the infrastructural field. And the different partners elaborate a specific local action plan considering these different topics. Here there is an overview of the key priorities, and we realize a document which collect a portfolio of actions and the canvas sheets. 3 strategic clusters of actions have been individuated. The first is fostering data and information exchange in intermodal transport system. The second concerns the strengthening the local and international cooperation. The third is related to shifting goods from road to sustainable rail and corridors. About the first point, it's important to promote and enhance reliable and fast exchange of information, both at the operational and institutional levels. This is very important in order to improve the transport and logistics processes. Another important activity is the integration between the different IT systems, because there are very much difference, a lot of differences between the different regions. And we think it's important to realize, to promote a port community system through a dialogue among different port community systems. The expected results are the decrease of the generalized cost, time, monetary, etc., associated with logistics and transport, and the increase of the competitiveness of the transport system as a whole. It's important the local and international cooperation in order to promote and facilitate the development of working groups to involve stakeholders from ports to the hinterland to discuss common problems and agree on possible solutions and strategies. It's important to fostering the international cooperation, removing border obstacles. Finally, concerning the road and sustainable, the shifting from road to rail and sea corridors, we assume the three priorities: the extension of the TEN-T to the Western Balkans, the integration of ports and hinterlands, and the motorway of the sea, in coherence with the user strategies in general. About the extension of the TEN-T to the Western Balkans, we can see in this figure a design of some important relation in. Okay, I am closing. The eastern priorities concerning the Italy, and specifically the Adriatic corridor and the Ionian components of Calabria. In Emilia-Romagna, the attention was to the Ravenna port. There are some examples of measures of action. For example, here there is the second railway track individuate from Koper to Liverka. And we have other activities concerning rail, in particular in Croatia or in around the city of Belgrade. There is strategies finalized to enhancement of railway and road connectivity at the regional and international level. So, closing, our activity finished with the design of a transnational action plan, which involved the different components of activity, with two main goals: to integrate a network of port hinterland hubs and to improve the competitiveness of the Adrian area. The main expected project impacts are a competitive regional intermodal port system, more reliable freight transport network, a sustainable and efficient logistics and transport, advancing transnational cooperation, exchange of data information. If you want, you can contact me for information, and here there are two publications. In the right, there is the final publication, which can give many information. We are too in a website, in social media. Thank you, and sorry for the...
No, not at all. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor Gattuso. I think Eastern is really a best practice to promote intermodality in the region. So, unfortunately, we have no time now for the foreseen question and answer session. So, we have just the time to thank you, to thank all the panelists once again for having been with us today, with their contribution to the